Welcome back to this collection of memories from winters gone by. Who can think of long winter nights and not have a warm spot for a New Year's Eve? Here is one of my favorite memories of New Year's back in the good old days. Back when I was growing up, I yearned to stay up like the big kids do. That meant I wanted to push my bedtime to just as late as I possibly could. I have no idea who those big kids were I always referred to when arguing my case to Mama and Daddy. My big brother Dennis, 5 years my elder, had the same bedtime as I. Now today I'm sure that bedtime that Mama and Daddy had for me would seem rather tame. From my earliest memories, it seems it was around 8 p.m. in the winter. In the summer it was as soon after sundown as Mama could get us in from play or chores, cleaned up and bedded down. In my early teenage years, I succeeded in pushing it to 9 p.m., with the argument that I needed the extra hour during high school days for completing homework assignments. But Daddy was a firm believer in the Franklinism, early to bed, early to rise makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise. Daddy was always in bed no later than 9 p.m. He saw no reason why his progeny should be up later. Still, I yearned to stay up like the big kids do. I got my chance one New Year's Eve. My folks were going out to a party somewhere, a rare occasion for them in those days. Grandma was staying with us 3 kids. I don't know what possessed Daddy to say it, but when Grandma asked what time we should be in bed, he replied, "I guess they can stay up until we get home." I knew I had arrived. Mama and Daddy wouldn't be home until they had all lang syned in the new year, and that would be after midnight. Finally, I would get to stay up like the big kids do. Of course, there was no television to watch, and it seemed there was nothing very exciting on the Philco, what with the holiday and everything. My little sister Donna was the first to succumb, a little after 9 p.m. Dennis was next, about an hour later. I was left alone in my bleary-eyed effort to stay up like the big kids do. I don't remember much else. Grandma either was touched by my valiant battle against sleep or was just too weary to put me in bed herself. At any rate, the next thing I knew, there were muffled, dreamy voices, and I was hoisted in Daddy's powerful arms and carried off to the bedroom. As he tucked me in, I'm sure I probably protested, "But I want to stay up like the big kids do." Many years have gone by since. Daddy's way stuck with me, and I'm most content today when I'm early to bed, early to rise. Janice and I raised our own 3 children with a 9 p.m. bedtime. A bit old-fashioned, I'm sure, for the television generation. I heard many youthful complaints the equivalent of, "I want to stay up like the big kids do." But they were to no avail. I just smiled inwardly, remembering my own futile attempt on that New Year's Eve, back in the good old days. Laura Steele remembers the early days of a New Year's Day tradition that continues even now. Laura recalls those special days of roses in Happy New Year.
"Start the new year out right," my dad would say jovially each December 31st. Resolutions were solemnly sworn. To study harder, to get some A's on the report card, to quit teasing sisters so much, and when we were older, to find a job in the midst of the Depression, to lose some weight, to visit old Aunt Susie more often. In the 20s, my folks had neighbors in to play cards while we children, who held to a strict 8 p.m. bedtime, retired. But at the witching hour of midnight, we were awakened to run outside in our nightgowns and bang and rattle spoons against pie tins while we yelled lustily into the black night, "Happy New Year!" Echoes reverberated from house to house, "Happy New Year!" Firecrackers sputtered, a toy cannon boomed. Our neighbor's gun ripped the night air with a deafening sound, and answering gunshots crackled from hill to hill, becoming fainter in the distance. But in a matter of 2 or 3 minutes, the clattering night became silent once more. Back into the house we slipped, shivering with cold and excitement, ready for that warm glass of milk and cookies for the wee ones, something better for the adults. We crept into bed with a feeling of satisfaction. The past was dead. Better times were a-coming. That is, if we were strong enough to keep those resolutions. Growing into our teens, we were then allowed to have New Year parties with our friends. Cards, with prizes from the 10-cent store, or dancing with the rug rolled up in the corner, or singing popular songs around the piano filled our evening until the midnight dash for the door to honk horns, crank noisemakers, and yell. However late the parties might continue on, everyone was up at dawn on New Year's Day. Relatives came from all directions, for ours was their halfway house to the famous Pasadena Rose Parade. Rather than fight the traffic and try vainly to find parking space, they all gathered at our home and walked in the crisp morning air over the hill and across the Arroyo Seco Bridge to the parade of Fantasyland floats and prancing horses. Anyone who has witnessed the Rose Parade in person or on TV knows what a beautiful beginning to the new year it is, combining the artistry of designers and the night-long work of hundreds of students, pressing rainbows of flowers into the animated creations. Tucked into the bowers of pink and yellow, red and mauve petals, the lucky queen and her ladies shiver in the cold air, but keep a continuous smile as they wave to the shouting crowd. The best of Arabs, pintos, and honey-colored palomino horses, dressed in polished silver, glint in the sun as they strut. Bands from many states beat out stirring music, while majorettes high-step it, flinging their twirling batons high in the air. Sights and sounds of the Rose Parade have been a part of our New Year's since 1922, with the exception of World War II years. We trudged back each year from this beauty in motion, tired from standing in the crowds, but with anticipation of a scrumptious noonday feast. Potluck brought by each family was spread out on the buffet. A turkey and a ham took the center, with huge bowls of potato salad, baked beans, green salads, jellos, fruits, and hot casseroles, usually Mexican-flavored, which Southern Californians specialize in, clustered round. Piling a plate high with the goodies, each person searched for a comfortable spot in a chair or sprawled on the floor to listen to the Rose Bowl football games, with friendly cheering and booing for different sides. After the ball games, dessert appeared on the sideboard. Samples of apple and pumpkin pies, chocolate and angel food cakes, cookies and homemade candies were carefully chosen. Now it was time to divulge all the New Year's resolutions and to take the kidding and laughs if you had failed to live up to your last year's prescribed aims. Predictions of upcoming marriages, new jobs, etc., were written down to be read the following year. The past year usually had proven to be frustrating to some, while pleasant surprises came to others. At this time of day, too, Mother's cousin, Johnny, every year passed out diaries to all the teenagers or younger, urging them to note down happenings throughout the year. Johnny's teachings of the importance of family history resulted in our looking up our roots, long before the popular book Roots was written, and making a record of them for generations yet to come. For nearly 80 years, except during World War II, our New Year's customs have followed the same pattern. TV, however, lures some of the family to watch the Rose Parade at home, while only the more agile make the hike over the hill. Tape recordings are made of present-day resolutions and predictions in place of written ones. The older folk have long since passed away, and we are now grandparents. We have seen many happy New Years.
Here's a special New Year's Eve memory in verse. Join Harriet Whipple as she put her hand to ringing in the new year.
5 churches graced our village, and each one had a bell. Upon a Sunday morning they always blended well. At 10 o'clock each one in turn rang out upon the air, telling all the townfolk it was time to gather there. They rang again at 10:30 when services would start. Hearing them in such accord was warming to the heart. I'd often watched the sexton as he pulled the rope to ring, and had a secret yearning just to try this very thing. One New Year's Eve we gathered for a watch night meeting there, expecting, as was usual, the church bells on the air, to welcome in the new year and bid the old farewell. But when the clock said midnight, we heard no chiming bell. Except for distant whistles, there were no sounds to hear. Not a single church bell rang to announce and greet the year. The preacher had already gone. The sexton hadn't come. I stood beside the bell rope, heart beating like a drum. Here was the chance I wanted. I was sure that I knew how. If we wished our bell to ring, then I had to do it now. The other folks watched me. They thought I wouldn't dare. Suddenly, I pulled upon the rope that dangled there. One mighty clang resounded on the dark and sleeping town. Then, though I tried it over, there was no further sound. I felt a bit deflated and wondered what went wrong. The ding had sounded futile without an ending dong. At 10 the following Sunday, the bells began to ring, but when it came to our turn, we didn't hear a thing. I hastened to the church, then to arrive in time to find an irritated sexton who usually was so kind. When the bell had not responded, though attired in Sunday clothes, he climbed the dusty belfry to see what caused such woes. It took a while to right the wrong my midnight act had wrought, and I knew I'd long remember the trouble this had brought. He came down all dust and cobwebs to finally ring the bell. Just before the service started, and once more it sounded well. I confessed I'd tried to ring it, though embarrassed and contrite, and I learned a knack was needed to ring a church bell right.
Whatever happened to those great New Year's toasts we made back in the good old days? It seemed that everyone collected them just to have the right toast at the right time. Audrey Van Lieshout remembers them well in A Toast to Yesterday.
My husband lifted his wine glass to propose a toast. Here's to life. We enter it naked and bare. Our journey through it is laden with care. Our exit from it is to God knows where. But if you're all right here, you'll be all right there. The sound of clinking glasses and a wreath of smiles went around the dinner table. It had been his mother's favorite toast, and all remembered the little Irish lady married to a wooden-shoe Dutchman. Together they had raised 16 children in a little Wisconsin town, and there was always room for one more at their table, one of whom was Uncle John, who was never at a loss for a toast. Each new bride, for example, was saluted with something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue, love to share and dreams come true, and all life's joys for both of you. When anyone left on a trip, he had the proper send-off. May you go where you like, and like where you go. All of his toasts were not so sedate, however. After a few drinks of homemade dandelion wine, he avoided the cautionary glances from his older sisters and entertained us with this. Here's to the girl who wore the newspaper dress to the ball. Her dress caught on fire, burned her attire, front page, sports section, and all. Today, toasting seems to have gone out of favor, but back then it was considered one of the social graces to be able to come up with an appropriate toast for every occasion. One that never failed to win sentimental acclaim was, here's to the happiest hours of my life, spent in the arms of another man's wife, my mother. To wind up a boisterous evening, young party guests toasted each other. I drink to your health when I'm with you. I drink to your health when I'm alone. I drink to your health so often, I'm worried about my own. Even in my own strict Methodist family, where the strongest drink served was hot spiced apple cider, toasts were popular. At election time, Dad was sure to lift his glass of spring water and expound, "May our great men be good, and our good men be great." Another of his favorites he said his grandfather brought from the old country was, "Here's to you. May you be in heaven an hour before the devil knows you're dead." Over the years, as we gather in the warm glow of Christmas dinner, this toast seems most appropriate. Here's to the ones that deserve them. Good health, good luck, good cheer. A more than Merry Christmas and a better one next year. My husband had his own favorite that fits almost any occasion. Here's to life and longer living, and more living in our life. Of course, I have the toast I'm fondest of, the one my husband gave on our wedding day. Here's to the girl I love the best. I chose her from all the rest. So let each one here do their part and drink to her with all their heart.
While the New Year's Eve celebrations were always so festive, nothing put romance into a young man's life like trying to buy his best girl's offering at the winter box supper. Erwin Benne recalls how he caught the school marm's eye in Miss Julie's box supper.
It happened during the winter of 1906, when I was in the 3rd grade. Miss Julie McDonald was teacher at Spring Valley, our country school in the farming neighborhood where we lived. 19 years old and as pretty as a primrose, she possessed a surplus of the sugar and spice and everything nice that makes a young woman attractive. To 21-year-old Willie Wallace, son of our local minister, and a student at the nearby agricultural college, she looked as lovely as one of the angels his father preached about, done up in an attractive package of earthly femininity. During and since high school, Willie had escorted Julie to church socials and neighborhood parties in the family carriage drawn by Prance and Ned, his father's team of sedate horses. Subdued and wearied by years of family and ministerial errands, often Willie's family went along, because there was no other conveyance. As his feelings toward Julie grew more serious, Willie became increasingly unhappy with his situation. He envied his fortunate young rivals who possessed spirited driving horses, fancy harness, and shiny single-seated buggies. So when Miss Julie announced there would be a Halloween program and box supper at Spring Valley, he decided something must be done to enable him to escort her to this event in the style she deserved. Casting caution aside, he took the few dollars he had saved and set out to talk to Dave Calloway, dealer in wagons, buggies, and leather goods. After lengthy haggling, a bargain was struck in which Dave agreed to let Willie have a new buggy on the prospects of his earnings after graduation. Willie's elation over the new buggy was shattered, however, by the thought of it being drawn by Prince or Ned. He longed for a horse like Jim Dawson's Ginger, whose looks and spirit would be worthy of the new buggy. Ginger, a magnificent gelding, with a coat as soft and shiny as black satin, was one of the best of Jim's trotters, who enjoyed high reputation at the local fairs. The more Willie thought of the picture it would make to have Ginger hitched to the new buggy, the more he determined to have him at any cost. So he mustered up his courage and set out for the Dawson place. He found Jim sitting on the chopping block looking morosely at the large pile of uncut wood. "How are you, Mr. Dawson?" he asked politely. "Terrible," said Jim. "My back is bothering me again and I can't cut wood or do much of anything else." "How about me cutting it for you?" asked Willie with a sudden surge of hope. "Couldn't pay you much," said Jim. "I'm mighty low on ready cash." "You wouldn't have to pay me in money. I'll cut up a pile for you if you'll let me use Ginger the night of the box supper. I'll even put it in the shed if you'll let me use your driving harness too," said Willie, knowing full well he was offering a big price for the privilege. "Well, I don't know," Jim said hesitantly. "Ginger is mighty spirited and hard to handle when excited, so I don't think I should let you." "I can handle him all right," said Willie. "Where's the saw? I'll go to work right now." A sudden spasm of pain in Jim's back overcame his better judgment, and he said, "All right, Willie, I'll let you use him, but if anything happens, don't say I didn't warn you." Conquering the woodpile cost Willie many weary hours of work, sore muscles, and blistered hands. However, these seemed a small price to pay for the pride he felt as he drove toward Julie's house on the night of the box supper. The harness and new buggy glistened in the twilight, and Ginger pranced along as daintily as a model on display. Many of Willie's recent daydreams had centered around a cottage built for two, with Julie and himself making up the twosome. As he bowled along, he decided this was the night to tell her of his dreams, and propose that she help make them come true. The surprise and excitement she showed over the new rig were added rewards for his labor. He helped her into the buggy, climbed in beside her, and they were on their way to the music of Ginger's hoofbeats and the soft whirring of steel tires on dirt roads. Arriving early at the schoolhouse, they lighted the lamps, built up the fire, and put finishing touches to the meager stage settings. "How will I know your box?" asked Willie. "It's wrapped in green paper, tied with red ribbon, and has a big red bow on top," she replied. The program began with a piece of welcome by Linda McGowan, a first grader. This was followed by other recitations, dialogues, group songs, and a pantomime. A male quartet composed of Rich O'Connor, Pat Kirby, Jason Reedy, and Alan Cooper sang My Bonnie Annie Laurie and Silver Threads Among the Gold. The program closed with a pretty little speech by Miss Julie, who thanked everyone for coming and urged the men to bid generously on the box lunches, because she wanted to buy a new organ for the school with the money they made. Then Alex Moran took over as auctioneer and humorist. A gaily decorated box was handed him from behind the curtain, and the auction began. "How much am I offered for this beautiful box, men?" asked Alex. Willie was startled to see the box he was holding up was wrapped in green paper, tied with red ribbon, and had a big red bow on top. He hadn't expected Julie's box to be the first one, but this must be it. "2 bits, bid Jay Dooley. "2 bits I'm bid. Who'll make it 4? Chanted Alex. "30 I'm bid. Who'll make it 50? Coaxed Alex. "40, said Jay. "50, bid Willie. "Who'll make it 60? Cajoled Alex. Going, and sold to Willie Mason for 50 cents. Willie went forward, paid for the box, and carried it proudly back to his seat. When he thought no one was looking, he lifted the name tag concealed under the big red bow, and in astonished surprise read, not Julie McDonald as expected, but Millie Schultz. Willie was stunned. Millie was engaged to Bill Schwartz, a big swarthy young blacksmith who was violently jealous of her and threatened to beat up any fellow who even looked at her in a possessive manner. Gaily the auction went on. Willie dreaded for Julie's box to come up for sale and catch him without enough money to buy it. He was feverishly trying to think who could he borrow from when the door opened and Bill Schwartz burst in with a rush of cold air. He made straight for Willie and said in a hoarse whisper, "I'd like to see you outside." Willie rose and followed him out. Excitement began to mount in the audience in expectation of a fight. "They say you bought my girl's box while I was outside," bellowed Bill, who was really a coward at heart, but always tried to make the most of his size and tough looks. Willie was only about half as big as Bill, but in his despair over the situation he was in, he was almost past caring what happened to him. So it surprised both himself and Bill to hear him say, "What if I did, you big lummox, and what are you going to do about it?" Big, cowardly Bill was completely taken aback by this unexpected attitude, so he decided to change his approach. Don't get sore, Willie. How about selling it to me? I'll give you what you paid for it." A long line of Scotch ancestors suddenly seemed to assemble around Willie and whisper, "He'll pay more." So he said, "Double it, or I'll keep it and eat with Millie myself." "Split the difference," said Bill. "Well," said Willie hesitantly, when hearing the sounds of the auction inside. "All right, but hurry." Bill forked over 75 cents, and Willie rushed back inside, fearing that Miss Julie's box had already been sold. But her friends who were handing out the boxes sensed what had happened and held it back. When it finally did come up, J. Dooley and Bud Warner bid him up, but Willie finally got it for $1.25, the highest bid of the evening. However, the pride he felt in getting to eat with the teacher, and the thought of riding home with her in his new buggy, made him feel it was a bargain at any price. When all the boxes had been sold, couples paired off. The boxes were opened, and amazing amounts of sandwiches, baked chicken, cake, pie, and other good things disappeared quickly, accompanied by shouts of laughter and good-natured raillery. After everything had been eaten, goodbyes had been said, and the crowd had left, Willie and Julie took down the stage curtains, straightened up the schoolroom, and put out the lights. Although Ginger pulled hard at the bit when he left the schoolhouse, Willie held him to a slow trot to let him warm up gradually. But as they crossed the bridge over Spring Creek, J. Dooley and Bud Warner burst out of the woods and galloped their horses alongside the buggy, yelling like Indians on the warpath. This was too much for Ginger, and as the boys swept their horses by him, he took the bit in his teeth and bolted. Willie tried hard to check him, but he might as well have tried to hold back a freight train. As they rushed along at full run, the best he could do was to try to hold Ginger in the road and hope he would tire himself out. Things went all right until they came up behind Joe Black's carriage, and Willie had to pull to one side to keep from running into it. The road was narrow, and as they went around the carriage, one of the front wheels struck a tree growing near the roadside. There was a splintering crash as the wheel broke into many pieces. Willie finally got Ginger stopped, but not before the buggy was scratched and further damaged from being scraped along the ground. There was nothing to do but leave it there and walk home, leading Ginger behind them. Crestfallen and crushed by this calamitous shattering of his plans, Willie's embarrassment and chagrin mounted to new heights as they passed Dave Jenkins's house. Dave always kept a pack of hunting dogs around the place, and they greeted the passers-by with a loud canine chorus. This awakened Dave, who poked his head out of an upstairs window to see what was happening, and when he recognized who it was, he bellowed jovially, "Why, Willie, is that any way to treat our teacher?" The reply that came to Willie's mind would never have been approved by his father, so he clamped his mouth shut and kept plodding on toward Julie's house. He knew full well the story would lose nothing and gain much, as Dave told it around the neighborhood in the morning. When they reached her door, he said, "I'm sorry, Julie. I wanted everything to be just right tonight, and instead, everything went wrong. Can you ever forgive me?" "I'm sorry too, Willie, for your sake, but it was exciting and funny too," she replied, and then added softly, "But then, I'd rather walk with you than ride with one of those other fellows anyway." "Oh, darling," choked Willie, "you are so wonderful. Will you come and walk through life with me?" "Yes, I'll walk beside you always," she whispered, and in spite of Ginger's impatient pulling at the rein, as a reminder it was time to go home, they sealed the promise with a long kiss. They were married the following June, in the month of brides and roses. The marriage knot Willie's father tied for them held firmly for more than 50 years as they traveled the road of life together.